Today we're with Academy Award winner George Chakiris, who played the role of Bernardo in the iconic, legendary film West Side Story. George, thank you for your time and welcome to 15 Minutes With.
God, thank you so much. I'm really glad to spend time with you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And George, I know you're busier than ever these days. I mean, you have a fantastic new book coming out, or actually it is out, excuse me. Fantastic new book out. The film is celebrating its 60th anniversary, and you have a
Yeah.
jewelry line to talk about. So where do you find the time?
Oh, hey, I've got lots of time. The jewelry line is very easy to handle. Doesn't take a lot of my time. The book is done. And talking about West Side Story, of course, is always a great pleasure for all of us because we were all so lucky to be part of it.
In your book, you talk about a shy 13-year-old George Chakiris being on the MGM lot, and you have a chance encounter with Elizabeth Taylor. A fellow chorister dances with her, but not you. And how
Yeah.
come?
Well, listen, I think his name was I've forgotten his name, but I think it's Phil. But he was probably maybe just 2 years older than me, and that seemed like a lot at the time. So he was more sophisticated, more mature, and he was really, really good-looking guy. And there was a party at the MGM school for all the kids on the lot, and at that it was a Halloween party, and he asked her to dance, and she very politely, very quietly accepted, and I I wasn't jealous at all and anything like that, but I sort of thought, good for him. He had the courage to ask, and I didn't.
And I know you weren't really credited a lot in your earlier films, but you worked with stars like Marilyn Monroe and Rosemary Clooney. And, tell me a little bit about that and tell me about dancing in White Christmas.
Oh, well, yeah, my first job in the business was as a dancer, as a chorus dancer, and it was such a great time. I got to be behind Marilyn Monroe, behind Rosemary Clooney, but it was such an incredible experience altogether. And I still look back on that as a really special time of life. I really loved doing it, and yes. Marilyn, on first name basis, right? We all say Marilyn. I never spoke to her or nothing like that, but I got to be around her a number of times, just coincidentally. And one of them was for the filming of Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, staged by Jack Cole, choreographer who was her favorite choreographer, and it's also a beautiful number, so beautifully staged by him, the sets and everything. Of course, being a chorus dancer, we were never credited, none of us ever were. But in White Christmas, the Mandy number, it was all four stars were in that number: Vera Ellen, Danny Kaye, Bing Crosby, and Rosemary Clooney. The dancing was done, of course, by Vera Ellen. So beautiful, so fantastic. She was an amazing dancer. And in that number, there were quite a few of us in the background. I think there were 16, maybe something like that, maybe more. But it was a great time. That choreographer, his name was Robert Alton, and all the kids. He was quite a famous choreographer from the theater in New York, and also for movie musicals. He had done Easter Parade. He was one of the choreographers that stars wanted, but also the kids really loved working for him. He was funny. He knew everybody's name, so you weren't just a chorus person. You were a person, and also he was wonderful to work for because his choreography was, I'll say, was demanding, and it was very fast. But he was great to work for, and the Mandy number was lots of fun. With the hard work, of course, I have to say it was fun. It was all fun.
Here's a piece of trivia you may or may not be aware of.
Okay.
Both of you were born in Norwood, Ohio. And what did they put in the water back then in Norwood, Ohio, to have such great dancers come out of there?
Well, you know, some years ago, I can't remember how long it's been. I was 3 years old when we left Ohio, but I got to go back maybe 15 years ago, something like that, to Norwood. And I hadn't been there since I was 3, but I got to see the house that Vera had lived in, you know, because she was from Norwood, Ohio, too. Really small. It's interesting to me how many people I've known over the years, professional people, are from Ohio. Phyllis Diller, I mean, you know, a great friend of mine, she's from Ohio. So yes, it was a good stomping ground, I guess.
Tell me about Marilyn. What was she like?
She was very quiet. She didn't engage in conversation with anybody because she was highly concentrated on her work. That's what mattered. And I got to be around her a few other times, and I noticed the same thing. She was always quiet. She was very polite. She was very courteous. She, of course, is one of the stars in There's No Business Like Show Business. And I have a friend who has a still photograph from that movie. And it's all the stars in this particular picture during a break. So they're just waiting. They're just waiting to work. Ethel Merman, Mitzi Gaynor, they're all in this particular picture. And the women are on leaning boards so they don't crease their dresses. And everybody's quiet. Nobody's saying anything. They're just waiting. But on the right-hand side of this picture, there is Marilyn, and she's talking to a young kid. So she's engaged, but with somebody sweet and young. It shows how, I think that picture to me shows how nice she was.
I prefer a man who lives and gives expensive jewels. A kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. A kiss may be grand, but it won't pay the rental on your humble flat, or help you at the automat. Men grow cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. But square cut or pear shape, these rocks don't lose their shape. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
In the book, you talk about, seeing the play West Side Story at the Winter Garden Theater in New York, and how inspiring was it for you to see, Carol Lawrence as Maria and Larry Kurt as Tony? What was that like? Take me back.
Well, I'll tell you, that was my first trip to New York. The work for dancers in Hollywood was less and less and less. So I finally made the trip that a lot of my friends had already made to go to New York, because, where do we go? Let's go to New York. I had two of my friends. One of them was Drusilla Davis, who was my partner in It Was Just Like Show Business. She had already made the move. So she and a friend of hers put me up on the couch in their living room, so I had a place to stay. They also knew everything that was going on in New York, everything that was going on. And what was going on that made a huge difference was they were beginning to cast replacements for the New York company that was just coming up to its 1-year anniversary. And they were also going to cast for the London company. So Drusilla, they told me what to do and who to ask for at the Winter Garden Theater. So I went there and I met Ruth Mitchell, who was the stage manager at that time. And she looked at me and she said, "I think you should read for Bernardo." And she gave me a script and set up a time for me to meet Jerry Robbins and read for him. So I eventually, I met him. He was rehearsing Ballets USA at the Alvin Theater, it was called. And during his lunch break, I read for the role of Bernardo. And then he asked me to look at the role of Riff, take a few minutes to go back in the wings and look at the role of Riff. I did that. And then he gave me the sheet music for Cool, because in the theater version, Cool is sung by Riff. In the film, it's sung by a character called Ice, played by Tucker Smith, who is so fantastic. He's so amazing. So I worked on Cool, and I came back and auditioned for Jerry again. And then on my birthday, September 16, 1958, Ruth Mitchell called me and told me that I had the role of Riff in the London company. And that same day, I had 7 checks from my California unemployment. So it was a great day. But that's how I came to be in West Side Story to begin with.
That's amazing. And you know, you just talked about being cast as Riff and actually being you know, the leader of the Jets, and you're suddenly in London for the London production of West Side Story. And you know, was that your first time out of the country? And what was that experience like? And how did you adapt to that?
Everybody was on a chartered plane. The only person who was not on that plane was Leonard Bernstein. Everybody else was there. Hal Prince, Stephen Sondheim, Arthur Lawrence, the cast, Ruth Mitchell. Everybody was on that plane. So I just now thought of it. But my first time out of the country. But look who I was with. I wasn't a lone traveler. I was with a group of incredible people. We were going to the Opera House in Manchester, and the thing I remember about Manchester was how wonderful the people were. The people were so nice, so kind, and I remember the pea soup fogs. Boy, the fogs. Pea soup is the right word. It was. I remember one morning going to a rehearsal. I thought it was nighttime. That's how black it was, because the fog was so thick. You had to find yourself you're physically on the street and make sure you're in the right direction. But the main thing was how nice everybody in Manchester was. And then we got to London. We continued rehearsing, and then finally opened. And one of our previews, Princess Margaret came. And she loved the show, so she came a few times to see the show, and we got to meet her. She met us all in a semicircle backstage after the show. That she was so beautiful, really beautiful young woman with this flawless complexion, and she was gracious. So it was really. That's one of my favorite pictures. Is one with Princess Margaret, all of us meeting her, and then later, I think in 1962, meeting the Queen at the Royal Command performance of West Side Story. And so I have those 2 pictures that I really love. But again, just my first time out of the country was a family experience. You know, I wasn't by myself traveling and experimenting and finding my way. I was there for work and with a group of people who were all there for the same reason. Yeah, it was great.
You know, for me, I'm starstruck because I'm talking to you, and then in reading your book, what I appreciate is the fact that you point out that you have that same, you know, like when you met Chita Rivera, right? It's like, okay, you're a fan at that point, right? So tell me about meeting and working with Chita.
I mean, she's a great friend still, but she was phenomenal. She had her Lisa Mordente, her daughter, was 6 months old at the time, and that's why Chita had been out of the show, because she had a baby. But when we did that run through, the audience, the theater community, was so thrilled to see her again, and she's amazing. She's really. And the beautiful there's so many beautiful things about Chita. First of all, she's funny. She has a wonderful sense of humor about herself. I always love that in anybody.
Yeah.
And she's kind. She's good. You know, she never has a bad thing to say about anybody. I just love who she is. But she's so amazing on stage. I mean, I find it so gratifying as an observer to see that person who is so wonderful on stage is also that wonderful in life. That's one of the beautiful things about Chita.
Yeah, you watch West Side Story, you can't take your eyes off of her, and the same is true with you. I mean, I watch it, and the intensity that you bring to that role, and the way it's so iconic. And so I'm wondering, like, from the opening sequence, you know, it sets the tone, right? Tell me about those dance sequences, the choreography, and how much rehearsal went into all that.
Well, I'll tell you, the choreographer, of course, was Jerome Robbins, who co-directed the film with Robert Wise. And we rehearsed at Goldwyn Studios here in town. We rehearsed everything, every scene, every musical sequence, every dance. Everything was rehearsed like it was going to be for the theater before we ever went to New York for location. And you used the word intensity just now, and that shot of me against the red brick wall and the opening part of the prologue. I can remember the intensity of that shot and the way it felt. It was just me, and the camera was really close, and Jerry Robbins was just on the other side of the camera, and I felt his intensity, which helped me get my intensity, because as a director, I could feel his presence, and I loved his presence, and his presence was so important to. First of all, it was his idea to begin with for the theater, but Jerry's just his presence, if nothing else, was very important to West Side Story.
Only his closest friends called him Jerry. I would call him Mr. Robbins. People might call him Jerome, but I know you could get away with calling him Jerry.
Yeah.
And
everybody called him Jerry. Yeah.
Oh my! And snapping never looked so cool as it did in that opening scene of West Side Story.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And that iconic image of you against the wall that you mentioned. Oh my goodness! Wow. And, the role of Tony, that went to Richard Beamer. And there were other big names thrown about. And in your book, you talk about that. You mentioned, I think, Elvis, and there were others like Warren Beatty and maybe Robert Redford and Burt Reynolds. Why did they pick Richard Beamer? What set him apart?
The truth is, I don't know how the casting was done at all. I do remember very specifically how Natalie was cast. Robert Wise went to Warner Brothers to look at Warren Beatty and Splendor in the Grass. And of course he saw Natalie, and he tells the story and he says, wow, that's our Maria. That's our Maria. That's how he saw Natalie. His intention was to look at Warren Beatty, but it was, he was struck by Natalie, and boy, was he right.
Wow. Yeah. The casting, the whole thing, it's a masterpiece. And, shockingly, they fired Jerry Robbins during the production of the film. And I think that they may have gotten most of the creative stuff out of that part of him before they let him go. Can you speak to that?
Well, I'll tell you, this is just what I thought. Evidently Jerry was taking too long, and that means it's costing more money, and so Walter Mirisch from the Mirisch Company, the producers of the film, evidently it was up to him to give the bad news to Jerry. But what I've always, there was quite a lot had been filmed and was in the can, as they say, before that happened. So I've always thought and believed that, it was okay to, if he was taking too long, it's okay to let him go now because we have what we need.
Yeah.
His contribution is just is priceless. It's just really priceless. And I know that there are a lot of horror stories about Jerry, and I'm sure he earned his reputation, but that's not all there was to this man. And I get a little, not discouraged, but people tend to be very stereotypical in their when they talk about when some people talk about Marilyn Monroe. What are they? It's the same old stuff, and nobody stops to think about the person really. They do, but and that's one of the things that I've always felt about Jerry, is that these same stories come up time and again. There's a new book on Jerry that came out just this last year called Jerome Robbins by Himself. And in this book, it has sketches, it has different things that he created, but there are lots of letters to and from the people he's known in his lifetime. And when you read those letters, you see how he felt. he was a perfectionist. We all knew that, and I've always thought he was a perfectionist with himself first. And he was harder on himself than he ever was on anybody else. I mean, that's how, because he was such a perfectionist, he couldn't do anything an easy way. He had to find the right way, and he always did. But that took time and perseverance and imagination and work.
You talk a little bit about the tension between the Sharks and the Jets, and that was
Yeah.
very real, and that was
Yeah.
part of his genius. Tell me about that.
Well, I remember the first day of rehearsal in New York. Everybody assembled in a circle around him on the stage, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he said, "Okay, I want the Jets to stay over there. I want the Sharks to stay over there. I don't want you socializing during breaks or even after we finish working. I want you to stay separate." Well, that was a beautiful piece of beginning of direction from him to create the tension that he needed from this young, relatively inexperienced group, and it was a beautiful way to start, and because again, without the tension, it doesn't work. So
Yeah.
that was just his way of starting on that path.
Come on. Beat it.
Chico! Chico! Allez, Chico! Allez!
You watch the film today, it's 60 years old, but
Yeah.
it looks fresh. I mean, it looks so fresh and so relevant, and that I think is a tribute to the directing and the choreography and the whole 9 yards, right?
Absolutely, and the choreography. Jerry's choreography. It was never a dance step or movement for the sake of a dance step. It was all the movement was dialogue. It always meant something. It was he choreographed for character, and that. I mean, you stop and think about that.
Yeah.
How challenging is that? It's not just another step. There's so much more to create and to make that happen. And so the fact that he achieved that in everything he did was a tribute to his. It's easy to use the word genius with Jerry, because he was genius. Yeah.
And how much did acting and dancing in the stage version help you in the actual movie when you guys got rolling? How much did that help you?
Well, let's see. Yeah, first of all, I really loved being in the theater and in that piece and getting to play Riff, and I did it for a year and a half. I played Riff a year and a half in London before the film surfaced, and then there was a bulletin board by the stage door, and kids would put up the things that they got from home, and the word was out, oh, they're going to make a movie, and none of us ever thought. And we were hearing names like, I remember very specifically, Elizabeth Taylor and Elvis Presley. Okay, huge stars in this movie. That didn't happen. And I remember in the London company, I think there were 5 of us. There were other companies as well. 5 of us had letters from United Artists saying that they were going to test us. And my letter asked me to do a scene as Riff and a scene as Bernardo. And by the way, Ken Leroy, the original Bernardo, who was phenomenal, he was playing Bernardo in the London company. So I saw him every night,
Yeah.
So Ken, we all went out to Elstree Studios outside of London for the day. The 5 of us all were driven out together to do a test in a movie studio. It was really, and we all did our specific tests, and at the end of the day, we went back to the theater to go into the show that night. Well, it had been an incredible day for all of us, and then the weeks started to go by, and we passed each other in the hallway. Have you heard anything? Nobody heard anything. 5-6 weeks had gone by, and we thought, well, that's that, And then one evening, I had a call at the stage door. It was from Jerry. And he said, we liked your test, but we'd like to test you further. Could you get a leave of absence just for a week to come to LA? And of course, the theater was nice enough to give me a week's leave of absence. So I flew home. I got to see my father. I hadn't seen my family for a year and a half. And I met Bob Wise for the first time. Bob Wise did a really nice thing. Weeks were going by, and they hadn't made a decision of any kind. And he sent me a letter. He said, we're sorry we haven't let you know anything. I'm paraphrasing. He said, but we feel we have to cast Maria before we cast her brother. And I understood that, so waited. And I'd become a Wimbledon, a tennis fan, spending all that time in London. At Wimbledon was a great, fantastic place to see tennis. And I was at Wimbledon, on a Friday, one afternoon, watching tennis. And I had this kind of unexplainable urge to get to the theater. It was too early for the show. But anyways, so I left my friends and went to the theater. And there was a telegram for me telling me that I had the role of Bernardo in the film.
Oh,
and
wow.
they ultimately did cast me before they cast Natalie, but they took their time because they had to take their time, of course. Yeah.
So you won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. So Shirley Jones was the presenter, I think, and the nominees included Peter Falk, Jackie Gleason, and George C. Scott. So,
And Montgomery Clift.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there, and they're, Shirley's naming the names, the nominees. What's going through your mind, if you can remember back, and what was it like when your name was called?
Well, I'm not sure what was going through my mind, and I'm not. Listen, when her name was called, I knew something good had happened, but the specific of it didn't dawn on me. One of the things in trying to think back and to understand what that moment felt like, I've come up with if you buy a lottery ticket, no way do you expect to win. You just, but somewhere you kind of hope you might, So when my name was called, it was like, okay, and I walked down the aisle and on stage, and Shirley, beautiful Shirley, and it was thrilling, because again, you just knew something really wonderful had just happened, personally for me. And one of the things, maybe the great thing about that evening was Rita Moreno and I attended together, and she, in her category, won Best Supporting Actress as well. So it was a flawless, perfect evening for us. I mean, it couldn't have been better,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And, thinking back, what does the award mean to you today?
Well,
Is that it behind you? Is it behind your shoulder?
It is. I got it out just for today. I don't normally keep it there, but it's over time. I think I've appreciated it more over time because there's so many awards that are given these days, and just in the way these awards are designed. The Oscar is such a beautifully designed piece. It's just perfect. It's so beautiful. So anything that tries to emulate what the Oscar looked like, the Oscar is still the most beautiful, physically the most beautiful. But also it remains it still remains the most prestigious of the awards, I think. You see a movie now with someone, and if somebody's won an Academy Award, we'll say so-and-so Academy Award winner. It always says that. So yes. I've come to appreciate that with time. It took me a long time to sort of zero in on that, but I'm grateful. I'm really grateful.
If someone had to ask me to describe you, and as a writer, I'm going to write this, but your acceptance speech to me epitomizes you, because you walked up there, and there's people that'll go up there and they'll talk until the music, and you said thank you. You walked up there and said thank you, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't prepared anything. It never occurred to me that I should prepare anything. So I was unprepared. And that was, I thought I did, now what I've learned since, it is appropriate to thank the people that you've worked with and so on. But I didn't know that, and I didn't think of it. So I just said what was on my mind and in my heart, I guess. It was a beautiful moment. I have been asked before, did anybody ever feel that West Side Story would have this kind of history? And of course, no one could have thought that at the time. I remember once during filming here in LA, I was during a break and I was standing outside the soundstage door with a couple of the kids, and there were two gentlemen there in suits and ties, and I assumed, as they say, from the front office, and they were very quietly speaking to each other. But one of them said to the other, he said, "I don't know if we'll have a commercial success, but we think we might have an artistic success." And I think they were able to say that because everybody loved what we were doing. Everything felt good, but you couldn't know what that would lead to, Yeah.
I like to be in America. Okay, by me in America. Everything free in America.
For a small fee in America.
Buying on credit is so nice.
One look at us and they charge twice.
I have my own washing machine.
What will you have though to keep clean?
Skyscrapers bloom in America. Cadillac zoom in America. Industry boom in America.
12 in a room in America.
Lots of new housing with more space.
Lots of doors slamming in our face.
I'll get a terrace apartment.
Better get rid of your accent.
Life can be bright in America.
If you can fight in America.
Life is alright in America.
If you're all white in America.
And George, again, I'm on cloud nine. I'm very thankful, very, very grateful. I truly appreciate your time. And like I say, I'm you as like when you were a kid coming up and seeing all these stars, you're that for me. So thank you so much for this interview. Thank you. Much.
And listen, thank you. It's been, I can't tell you how nice it's been to talk to you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. It's an opportunity for me too.
Well, I appreciate it, George. Yeah. And, best of luck to you in the future, in your future endeavors. And I hope our paths cross again soon. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay. God, thank you so much. Thank you.